Hello, everyone, and welcome to Successfully Navigating Teaching Demands in Exercise Science. I'm Phyllis Hittner with Wolters Kluwer, and I have a couple of teammates with me today of Lindsay Parambo and Adam Wahlberg. And our main host is Dr. William Kraemer. Just a couple of points to cover before we fully launch our session today. This meeting is being recorded, and an email will go out to everybody after the session has ended with a link to the recording. So if you'd like to view it again or share with your colleagues, you're more than welcome to do so. There's also a short form with that email if you're interested in additional information or contacting someone from Wolters Kluwer. You have the opportunity to do that within that as well. Everybody on the call today is muted, but we welcome questions from everybody. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A area, and you can type your questions into there, and then we will get those covered for you. And with that, I'd like to transition over to Dr. Kraemer, who has over 35 years of experience, and we value what he has to share with us today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being here today. I know that navigating the development and the delivery of a course is one of the big challenges. We've seen in the past year with COVID that it's even been more challenging because we've had to deal with the whole construct of online education, hybrid education, etc. So I really am excited about just talking about some basic concepts. So whether you're a new assistant professor just starting off your particular career, whether you're trying to make a full professorship, or like me, you've been doing this for really now in teaching and education for over 46 years, I think the bottom line is you're challenged by continually trying to improve on how you do things. So I think there's a big continuum of different aspects relative to small courses that you can deal with versus large courses. I've taught courses with 12, 14 students in exercise science, and then I've taught courses with over 1,200. Very different in their demands and how you interact with students and backgrounds. And also who's coming into the class is going to be very important with regard to their objectives and what they're trying to accomplish. So it's really a challenge right now to make course that's exciting and that you feel good about, and that basically the students learn from and develop the construct of what a professional is all about. So let's take a look at the next slide. Well, first of all, what I like to do with many of the courses I teach, or all the courses I teach, is I try to look at it from the student's perspective. And that's really important because what you're trying to produce are students that become professionals in their field. And there's a variety of different areas where they're getting ready to when they take an exercise science course. Most frequently, you see they're going to go on to graduate school, especially from the undergraduates, they're going to go on to a master's program. They're going to go on to wanting to get into DPT schools. Some are going to med schools, some are going to PA schools. Some are basically going to go into the field and work professionally right in the field. So the sense of professionalism is very important. And I think promoting the young students' construct of being professionals is really important as you present your course and as it goes forward. And I think they'll appreciate that too. And then you have to look at what the fears of the students are. I mean, I do this even as a full professor. What are they? And they vary over the years. In the last year, we found a lot of new fears relative to online education. And then finally, grading becomes a really big issue. How am I going to be evaluated? Now, the recent studies that have been out there, we know grade inflation is going on. It's been going on since 1960 dramatically. And there's a lot of issues around that. That would be great for another type of webinar. But in this case, grading is a concern because many times getting into schools or getting into the next step of their career, even in looking at job interviews, grading has an impact on their grade point. So then what are the professional outcomes of this degree that they're getting as your course is part of? That's important for you to understand too, because many times an exercise science course is slotted in. Now I typically do exercise physiology and I've slotted into all these type of outcomes we've talked about. And then what we really want to do, and the university templates really help you with this, is you need a meaningful syllabus to explain really what you're trying to accomplish. And then we do video recordings on that syllabus and we talk about it. That's one of the outcomes positively from the COVID era. And we want to make sure we don't underestimate how important that syllabus is to let them know where we're coming from and where we're going. Now, the academic challenges that we see are really multivariate. We all know in the world of academia, we have teaching, research, and service, and we get pushed into different areas. So it depends upon the demands of your university. I've been at D1 research universities at Penn State, Ohio State, and also with regard to UConn as we moved into that realm. So research becomes a real important aspect, but yet teaching is important as well. And integrating those two along with your service is really a challenge. And your courses can help that and show how research actually is part of the teaching mission and service, et cetera. So I think it's really important to understand that, looking at all the promotion and tenure dossiers that I have to look at now, review external reviews for, having been on mentorship programs with young faculty, having been on a host of different PTR committees, I think this is where the challenge is to understand what it is. Now, the problem we get is that sometimes, especially at the young stages of careers, you're so obviated by the teaching demands that basically the research suffers. And basically you can't, you're in the mud, you're in traction. So the construct of manipulating these type of programs and understanding how they interact has got to be looked at. In fact, I'll mention later, there was a neat study way back in 2010, an economic study of how the mathematical modeling of this quid pro quo in the different elements based upon the university's demands and departmental demands and what they view as important would affect this. And it also affect outcomes that would affect future progression, either to another university or up or to within the university, et cetera. So this is really a challenging area that we have to look at. So one of the things we start off with, and I know many times this is kind of the quote game, and in the studies that have been done, we know the dynamics, we know the mathematical dynamics that are going on with regard to how this quid pro quo, the relationship between student perspective, professor perspective, and many times what happens if in fact grading inflation occurs, and studies have shown, for example, that you find the best teaching is maybe not necessarily with the highest ratings because it's harder grading structures. And there's a lot of relationships that have been looked at, but it's key to your yearly evaluations and your promotion and tenure and reputation of your course. So you have to pay attention to your teaching and the evaluation that's going to occur. Now, here are just a couple template slides that I took that are basically general slides that happen when you see the evaluation of your teaching by a colleague. If I go in and evaluate another professor's teaching, there's a whole bunch of information like this that are given to that colleague of yours that's going to be looking at it. But ultimately, what many times happens is that what that faculty member is looking for is they're looking for your organization of your lecture. They're looking for the use of technology in today's really technology-driven student. They're also looking for with regard to the rapport you have with the students. And finally, your voice and your pace of the class. These are the main things I've seen after you look at these type of algorithms that you see here that are put forth. So if you look at the next slide, you can see a few more. The student engagement, the interactions, essentially with 1 or 2 times in your 50-minute class, it's basically the organization, the technology use, the rapport with students, and then the pace of the class and your voice and your delivery becomes really important to this aspect. Now, you have to carefully go over a syllabus. And this is, like I say, very important. In the COVID era, we've now taken care to basically record our course and talk about the syllabus in great detail. and basically make it a production unto itself. So obviously, these are just some of the basic descriptive things that come from a template, which is standard. And every university now has that as a basic template for the individual faculty member to use in order to design a template that meets all the human resources and all the different requirements for that particular aspect of a course at that university. Next one. So here we see all the different aspects, the knowledge, the skills needed. Now we had, for example, in the world of COVID, we had to make sure that everybody had online capabilities and the ability to use technology in a much more dramatic way than in the past. And this is very much a function and has extended most of our capabilities to deliver content in a variety of ways that we'll talk about in a little bit later. Now, here's the thing that basically drives most students crazy. They want to know how they're being evaluated. The most questions I get come from testing and evaluation. Now, one of the things that we look at is basically you're going to get percentages relative to how you do it. And typically now universities will put forth their recommendation for the grading scale that you can see here as an example. And then now we even have in the COVID era where people could opt out to get pass fail. And that's a whole nother thing. How do you handle that? And I think the key thing is to make people to understand, number one, if they miss a test, what's going to happen? That's the biggest question they get. If they miss an assignment, how do they make it up? How do you do makeups? In many cases, are you going to allow makeup sessions, or what happens? Are you grading on attendance? All these things. So you have to be able to do that. In the world of Carmen that many of us live in now, we can see this and they can see this on a real-time basis. The other thing that will happen is the fact that you want to evaluate your own test questions. Now, what you can see, and maybe we can have Adam talk a little bit about that, is there's many ways to evaluate your test. So you want to look at that and you want to see what's going on with regard to, any type of way you compensate for curving. What we've done in the COVID era, we have 9 type of quizzes because we were doing weekly. And what we did is we dropped the lowest quiz. So they automatically got a benefit from not being penalized for one bad week. So there's many ways to do that, and you have to think about it. But students feel this is very important. Then they feel it's fair and they understand what they're doing. Next one. So here it is. Late, again, how are you going to outline your policy for late work and makeup exams? That's really important for them to do. Then here we go, assignment descriptions. They got to be in detail. You got to be clear of what your objectives are, why they're doing it. And basically, they have to have policies relative to your university for how they respond. And this is really important. What is your netiquette? How can they respond with regard to communicating with you? And that's really important. In the old days, I would get an email say, hey, yo, what's going on? What happened to my test? That's not appropriate. So you have to set forth a level of professionalism throughout the syllabus, throughout your class, in my mind, to promote this professionalism that they're going to go into in the next stage of their careers. Next one. So you have a lot of institutional policies, which I'm not going to get into, but you'll see a whole list of different institutional policies that will be in a syllabus relative to how it's being conducted, and your course is part of these different policies. And then next will be the topic outline. Now, this is just a quick example, but one of the things that we've had to do is that you have to understand what your students are coming in with, because exercise science courses can run the full continuum where they have been completely prepared. And when you say size principle, they know exactly what it is. But if you're dealing with new, younger people that are just starting off, that had just an anatomy physiology course, you then have to understand, maybe I need to develop them. Now, what has happened in some places is that they'll go through a systems physiology course and then they'll go through the applied course in a 2-course sequence. That's what we did at Connecticut and also what we did at Ohio State, so that when we get to the applied, they have the basic intense look at the systems physiology. Also, you can link things. For example, what's not listed here, I also taught the courses where if I want to teach about strength training, maybe I do muscle, nerve and muscle, and then I look at strength training, and then I do cardiovascular and cardiorespiratory, and then I do cardiac rehab and endurance, and then I combine later when I talk about compatibility. So there's ways to link things together on your roadmap, depending upon your student's background and the progression in their career, because many times it's really tough. And this is the one thing we try to do. It basically let the book give the student the feel for the complexity of the field. You know, we write the book, in the book, the exercise physiology book that we wrote, it will show them the complexity, but then they can ask questions and you can then deliver the overview so they can then delve in deeper. So there's ways to look at course outlines and roadmaps so that you're achieving what you want to do for them as future professionals. Next one. So here we want to know one of the things that we've done, and again, this goes back to the kind of the metrics of that study that was published in economics, Eastern Economics in 2010 by Love, is that basically we want to understand the fact that what's the perspective of the student and how are they evaluating you. And you can see here that there's a host of different constructs here. This is probably as universal as I can think, that the students are going to evaluate you on. And what I found is that you have to be aware of this type of phenomenon because of the fact for a well-delivered course, you want to make sure that the students understand what you're trying to do and basically how they're going to benefit from it. And in this case, what you can see here is the fact that the student's going to read this at the end of the year. The subject matter of the course was well organized. The course was intellectually stimulating. These are how they're ranking you on a number of systems. So many times what I do is I know what my evaluation is, and I then remind them throughout the course, you know, we're doing this as a highly organized thing, and here's how we're organizing it. Basically, I hope this is intellectually stimulating to you because we're going to talk a little bit about somatotrophs in the anterior pituitary gland, which is a little bit beyond what I thought, but I think it will be intellectually stimulating for you to look at. So we basically make sure that we are identifying our concepts and our structures so that basically it allows them to understand that you are achieving what they're trying to achieve professionally. And thus it's going to follow through on these different areas that you then know that the course is going to be delivered and you're going to develop young professionals with the background. So when I get them as a master's student or a doctoral student or a DPT lectures, I've taught in 2 DPT schools, that I know that they're well prepared and I know they're ready to go. So these are important. I think how to do this, you have to really interface with your content solutions advisor to really take advantage. And here's the other thing. Most of the time when you're a young professor, even myself, you get embarrassed to ask for help. Ask for help. Get help from the people that can help you deliver courses with all the type of resources and types of things students are looking for today. So I think I'll turn over to Adam a little bit, let him talk about some examples of this.
Thank you, Dr. Kraemer. Thank you. Yes, I am your content solutions advisor and one of them here at Wolters Kluwer. We call on exercise science kinesiology programs all over the country, helping faculty to get the content that's right for their course and to make their jobs a bit easier. And we do that in a variety of ways. In previous times, it used to be a print textbook, and then you'd have a CD-ROM or what have you that came in the back, and you would use that for PowerPoint slides. Well, these days, everything is digital. Even the books are digital, and we've evolved past just a digital textbook. We're looking at adaptive quizzing solutions. We're looking at full curriculum solutions. So that's I'm going to take a look at 2 or 3 of those today, and hopefully, you find something that might be of use to you. I'm going to go ahead and exit the PowerPoint at this time and move over to a couple of other things here. So first thing I'd like to show you is a new initiative that WK has recently undertaken. This is called Lippincott Connect. This is the homepage of Lippincott Connect that you're looking at, your bookshelf, if you will. It's a collection of digital textbooks that your students can gain access to. And while they have access to the full content of the digital textbook, they'll also have access to, pardon me, let's try that again. I'm going to click into Dr. Kraemer's book, and you can see that on the left, you have access to the full content of the text, and then on the right, you have access to all the student resources, all the ancillaries associated with that textbook. So for example, in Dr. Kraemer's new 3rd edition, there are 51 videos and animations that the students have access to while they're reading the textbook. The other element with Lippincott Connect is that the students will purchase a print book. They also get access to what you see here, the digital textbook and the student resources, all in one convenient online portal. Also, with Lippincott Connect, the students can quiz themselves using the self-assessment function. It's organized by chapter. As you can see, chapter 2, there are 25 questions. And the nice part about Lippincott Connect is that they get instant remediation. So let's say I wanted to take 3 questions just for the sake of brevity, and I get 60 seconds per question. Of course, I'm not going to know the answer to any of these, but they're multiple choice. So I'll just whiz through these really quickly so you can see what the remediation aspect looks like. So you get a nice pie chart. They can see, how long it took them to complete it, and then below they can see, which answers they received, which answers were correct and which answers they need more help with. So, I mean, this is a great tool for students to quiz themselves chapter by chapter as they're moving through the topics of the course. Another great aspect with Lippincott Connect are the study collections. So they can create as many of these study collections as they want and customize them. You'll see that I've created one called Notes for Upcoming Exam. If I click into that, I only have 2 of them here, but you'll see that I have basically my own little study guide here. These are the things that I feel I need for the next upcoming exam, and I have notes about why it's important. And I want to show you how you create those notes to begin with so that you can build out that collection. So let's say I wanted to highlight this paragraph here. What I do is just take my cursor, highlight the entire thing, and there's a little dialog box that's going to pop up right here. So I'm going to put in study for exam. I'm going to select a highlight. Maybe I don't want the highlight to be yellow. Maybe I want it to be periwinkle, blue. I'm going to call that upcoming exam. I'm going to add that and select it. And I'm going to add it to the Notes for Upcoming Exam study collection that I've created. And now when I head back to Notes and Highlights, you see that now that paragraph appears in my study collection. I need to study that for my exam. So this is a way for your students to really distill the content of the book down to what they feel or what they've been told by you is most important, the most important aspects, the most important competencies that they need to get under their belt. The idea behind Lippincott Connect is that it is a print book along with a digital book, along with all the student resources, all in one place. They can access it on their laptops. They can also access it through their smart devices because it is a responsive interface. Take it with them on the go and be really convenient, for them to use. So that's Lippincott Connect. That's something that just rolled out last year. It's available for Dr. Kraemer's new 3rd edition of Exercise Physiology. It's also available as we move through the year. It'll become available for more new editions of titles that we publish. Notably, several of the ACSM titles that we are publishing new editions of this year will also be available on Lippincott Connect, starting with ACSM's Guidelines 11, and then moving through, I believe there are 6 or 7 titles that the ACSM publishes this year that will be available on this platform. So that is Lippincott Connect. Next, I want to talk about adaptive quizzing. So there is an element that is available with Dr. Kraemer's book called PrepU. PrepU is an adaptive quizzing solution. It's available on The Point, which is where faculty access all of their ancillaries, all the instructor resources, the PowerPoints, the image banks, and what have you. If you are adopting an exercise science textbook from Wolters Kluwer, it's important to note that the instructor resources are complementary. So reach out to your designated content rep, and they can get you an access code to access on The Point for those resources, complimentary. So that's something to know. I think Phyllis might have mentioned at the beginning that there is a rep locator page on the point where you can enter your university and find out which rep is assigned to you. If you find that unwieldy, or you can't find it, or you've run into issues, my name is Adam. You can find me. I'll drop if somebody could maybe drop my email in the chat. Just put that away somewhere, and if you reach out to me, I can find a rep for you. I'd be happy to do that. Getting back to PrepU, I want to show you that PrepU is built for instructors. It's also built for students. Right now, we're looking at the instructor dashboard. PrepU works on what's called mastery level. So each question in PrepU has been calibrated to a certain mastery level, 1 through 8. 1 being a level of difficulty that's the least, and 8 being the most level of difficulty. So in the ideal, as your students are taking quizzes, you'll see this sort of histogram, but you can't see it here because I'm under my own account, but you'll see an orange line that moves up and to the right over the course of time as your students put some of these competencies under their belt. You can drill down to each individual student to see their usage. You can download that student usage roster. You can even drill down so far as to see how students did on any particular question at any given time. This is something that instructors have told me this is great for their office hours. Students say that they're struggling, but that maybe you've drilled down to that student and you see that they're not really interacting with PrepU as often as they could, or maybe they're interacting with PrepU at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning when they're not fresh, they're not plugged in, they're deliriously tired. So faculty can use those insights to help students get back on track. This is again, this is a formative assessment tool. We have question libraries associated with each of these books. So you'll see for the second edition of Dr. Kraemer's book, there are 4 parts. If you open parts, you can drill down to the individual chapters. And then you can see there's 114 questions for this particular chapter. So if you wanted to put together your own quiz for your students, all you have to do is begin checking a few of these, any questions that you prefer, and then you can make a collection. I won't go through the whole shebang right now, but suffice it to say, you can cherry pick questions that are available and then put them into a quiz that you then assign to your students. And the assigning is done here. So you choose a question collection and away you go. The other nice thing about PrepU is you can choose a mastery level assignment. So this is something where, let's say you didn't want to cherry pick questions, or you didn't want to put together your own quizzes. If you choose a mastery level assignment, you can say, okay, I'd like for the students to attain a mastery level of 3 before they come in for their next lecture. What PrepU will do is it'll keep throwing questions at them on the content that you choose until they've reached that mastery level of 3. So you're basically priming your students to have intelligent discussion about that particular chapter before they've even hit the classroom. That way, it's not just Dr. Kraemer at the front of class just going on and on and on. You're simulating a dialogue, which is something that PrepU can help you do. On the student side, we'll switch over to the student side. The students can take it upon themselves to quiz themselves. They can take your assignments, but they can also take quizzes on the go. Take a 5-question quiz on chapter 12 while you're waiting for coffee on your phone, or while you're waiting for the bus, or what have you. Again, just like Lippincott Connect, this is a tool that's used. We're trying to bring students and also faculty into the digital age, where we know that you don't always have time to sit down and open a textbook and take notes, and this is all happening a lot faster than it did 5, 10, even 20 years ago. So that's why we're building these digital solutions to supplement the text, for you and your students. Last thing I want to show you, I mentioned full curriculum solutions earlier. We have what's called Health Library. So Health Library is a, pardon me one moment. I'm just trying to get over to the, here we go. LWW Health Library. So what is it? Health Library is a full curriculum solution for your exercise science or kinesiology program. This is especially handy if your program is oriented towards the ACSM, if your students are required or highly encouraged to seek their exercise physiology certification, their EPC, at the end of the program. That's what the ACSM certification suite is for. And you'll see down here, here's a list of titles. Some of them are being updated this year that is included in that suite. You can also go with just the exercise science collection. So, let's say that really what you're looking for is a collection of books, exercise physiology, biomechanics, motor behavior, that the students will need to have access to throughout the entire, length of the curriculum. The idea behind LW Health Library is that the students are not sitting down and reading one textbook for a course, right? You can see here, this is, all the publications they have access to within Health Library. But the idea is that, let's say, they're learning about brachial plexus. You can search cross-title, and as you can see, I got 42 hits for brachial plexus, and they're showing up in ACSM certification suite, showing up in here. Look, here's an image. Loading, loading, loading. I'm going to open this up in a new tab so we can see. So all of these results, this is how students are learning these days. It isn't, they're not reading one chapter from start to finish. They just want the facts. They just want to know, on this particular topic, what they need to know. And the more images, figures, tables, videos, case studies, questions they can drill themselves with, the better, as opposed to just, reading, through the book. What else about, here's something else about Health Library that I think students really like. Again, there's a self-assessment piece to Health Library. Let me just X out of this. So we head to the top of the page. As you can see, there's probably over 1,500 or 2,000 questions here on different topics. Neuromotor and development assessment, 268 questions. And this operates a lot like it does over in Lippincott Connect. So I want to take, again, 3 questions. We're going to start the quiz. This is a way for your students to drill themselves. And again, I'm a layman, so I'm just going to breeze through these. See, it looks just the same as it does in Lippincott Connect. So, so that's another really handy tool for your students to be able to use. There are case studies involved with the Exercise Science Health Library. And there's also some supplemental content. These are, depending on the collection, there are videos, lab manuals, animations, student resources. So this is something else that your students can take advantage of. Health Library is typically a departmental purchase. It's not something that students subscribe to on their own. It's a decision either by the department or by your university's health sciences library. There may be some of you listening right now that already have access to either the ACSM certification suite or the exercise science collection through your librarian already. So I hope you found these resources to be helpful. One of the things that we really talk about these days as the sales reps is we're not selling textbooks anymore. We're selling content. We're here to consult with you to find out what the best content is for your course. And getting back to Dr. Kraemer's points from earlier, the content is meant to help you score 10 on those 10 prompts, those 10 teacher evaluation prompts at the end of the course. To be of help to you to achieve your goals as well as help the students achieve theirs. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to, yes, Phyllis, thank you.
Adam, I'm gonna break in and ask you to do me a favor, because one of my favorite features of Health Library is what it does for faculty and allowing them, when they are preparing for their curriculum, to include links from Health
Yes,
Library directly into their syllabus. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
absolutely. Absolutely. So as an example, let's dive into ACSM's exercise testing and prescription, just because it was the first thing that popped up for me. So something that faculty ask a lot about is, how do I provide a seamless experience for my students from their LMS directly into Health Library? And the way you can do this is by picking up a link. So let's head into chapter 2 and I'll show you what I mean. So what you can do is go ahead and add this. Let's add table 2.1 to our favorites here. Your favorites are going to crop up at the book level. So you can see here my favorites, and here's table 2.1. That's the one that I just favorited. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on that link, and I'm going to copy it. From there, I can open a new tab. I don't have an LMS to show you. What I can do is put it directly into the URL bar. I hit enter. Students are taken directly to table 2.1. So the idea is that if students are logged in to Health Library and they're logged into your LMS, that table 2.1 will open in a new tab or in a new window, depending on how they have their browser set up. They'll go straight from LMS to table 2.1 without any fuss or muss. And you can do that for basically anything in the book. All the tables, all of the all of the chapters, all of this is able to be linked. So I hope that I think there's a lot of faculty who do ask about that, is how to provide that kind of seamless transition to the content.
Thank you for sharing that, Adam. And Dr. Kraemer, I have a couple of questions for you myself, if we can switch back to you for a moment.
Yes.
You touched briefly on the changes that have happened to your curriculum because of COVID, which I think we are all well aware has changed the way everybody works, everybody learns. Did you meet as an entire faculty team in order to discuss what your kind of adjustments would be to your curriculum? And was there any input from your students at that point as to, you've discussed how important it is with the student evaluation portion and tying that to your curriculum. Was that something that you took into account for your readjustment for COVID?
Yes, the Ohio State University had a whole COVID team relative to educational support, technology support, and all these different aspects. And obviously, we were very concerned about the students' translation to this, which was the primary concern. Many of the courses were done with Zoom and with online, online pre-recorded courses. For example, you have live PowerPoints and you have recording going over that. So the student can go through a university YouTube channel and they can watch your whole lecture on PowerPoint through that process. Or we have live Zoom courses. So there was a whole use of technology. And yes, the university supported this whole phenomenon. And many times the challenges were not so much global as they were individual, because different courses have different types of demands for content. As you can see here today, you've got a tremendous amount of overload for information coming at students, and they need to be able to absorb it. I always say what's important is what's going in long-term and what's going to be maintained. So when you take the next course or you get into a clinical rotation, you right away can think about what you've learned and you remember it. A lot of times, if you just have information memorized and dump, that was the old medical school model that doesn't work too well. So you got to have workable knowledge. And that's where the professor in charge of that particular course has to be really sensitive to what is being captured by the students and evaluating how your testing and evaluation is showing you that you're on the right track. I use the sports analogy. Just like when we train athletes, we test them periodically, and we test them not because of the fact we're trying to do anything to them. We want to know if our program is effective. So testing, for the most part, is what's telling you as a professor, am I getting what I need to get from my students as young professionals and long-term memory? But yes, the Ohio State University and other former students of mine across the country, around the world, really have changed the way we now can use online education. And there's been student input, faculty input, and then a lot of differential faculty needs that are highly individualistic to the type of content they're having to deliver. And I think today's student who basically is multi-screened, visual, and a lot of times wants to learn that way, it becomes very important that we have those different models kind of integrated into the learning phenomenon, because some students read by reading, learn by reading, others learn by listening, others learn by doing. So there's a whole bunch of connections that have to be made. In the COVID world, we had to show how the information was going to be utilized in the practical world by giving examples like that with videos and with ideas relative to that. So there's lots of aspects to that that makes a successful professional that you're trying to train, just as when we train athletes, we're trying to train successful athletes. I look at the student as being an intellectual athlete, professional athlete that we're getting ready for their next stage. And it's daunting, by the way, because there's a lot of information out there. And the biggest thing we do in our courses is try to teach people to evaluate information, evaluate content, evaluate sources, because there's so much misinformation out there. That's a major element in the type of courses that I've taught, is to teach how to realize and look at the source of that fact.
Thanks, Bill. That's a great point, and kind of brings me to a question, actually. You know, you talked a lot about the importance of fostering professionalism, and you just spoke to the importance of needing to be able to become kind of media literate when it comes to evaluating resources. Another side of that is kind of getting students prepared to use resources that they'll encounter in their professional careers. So can you speak a little bit to how you foster that kind of familiarity with those resources, things like journals, other trusted resources that they'll encounter?
Exactly. Well, I think part of the way to foster it is to basically utilize published research from journals like Med Science and Sports and Exercise, the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research, the different array of journals that are actually part of the OVID system, and LWW and Wolters Kluwer. The whole phenomenon is that the only way you foster factual understanding is in our first chapter in our textbook, we're unusual. We take a whole chapter to try to explain research to the undergraduate student. And I've even had master's students have to read that chapter, because that's the way you really are trying to integrate understanding. If you don't understand what you're doing, you can't do it. We have a favorite saying in our laboratory, and that is ignorance makes you vulnerable, and we're all ignorant. So our challenge is to become less ignorant, more knowledgeable, and the research process and what it's all about, how one study can be out here, but it doesn't mean that that's the only way to look at. One study doesn't become fact. It's how the scientific method works. And that's, again, teaching research process, teaching understanding how facts are developed in their context. We always talk about context, context, everything we do, whether it be in the med school or whether it be any other area. It's always, how is this fact appropriate and in what context? And we always use the concept in our department because of Dr. Volek, if butter's bad, butter's good. Butter is bad if you're eating high amounts of carbohydrates and sugar, because fats and sugar don't get along too well. But if you're eating protein and proper fats and a little bit of carbohydrates, butter is probably okay and good. So the bottom line is context is so important to understand all aspects of our profession. And it's a challenge.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to ask you, one of the things that you suggested during your presentation was that it's really important to foster a relationship with other faculty members and learn from them and discuss with them. Do you find, is that something that is normally fostered on an institutional level, or is it really on the individual faculty member to make connections either within the same institution or outside to build a relationship and kind of banter and brainstorm ideas for?
Well, I think it's highly variable. I think it's highly variable. If you look at the analysis of what scientists are, the majority of scientists rate out as being left brain introverts. The part of the scientists are left right brain extroverts. And that is the type of individual that's more than likely to go out and try to seek connections and all this type of thing. And many of the laboratories and in different, especially research universities, although team research is being promoted at the NIH and in federal and different research programs, the bottom line is that it does take some initiative to go out and try to connect across the board, even within departments, because we get so isolated and what our own little silos. And we talk about this. Compartmentalism has been a major change over the last 50 years in the area of science, in the area of any field, because of the fact that a lot of people just can't get the connection. How does this relate to what I did? I remember years ago, we tried to come up with what we had in common at a big university. And basically we found out, well, the only thing we might have common is exercise. But that context of how it was used is completely different. So it is a challenge in today's world with the research programs, with the specialties going on. But I think because of the fact you need so many different types of connections and vectors to really do good research, it's being fostered. In the educational aspect, it depends upon the level. At the doctoral level, you need that exceptionally well. At the master's level, it starts to become very apparent. The undergraduates need to see that from their volunteer work in the laboratories, from their look, how you look and present it, because they're just trying to get a base. We have another saying, we say, well, you know, you wanted just a drink of water and we gave you a fire hose in the face with information. How can you swallow? How can you understand? So you have to relay that type of phenomenon. And again, that's why the understanding of the research process and understanding is so important for teachers to really pull it together for that student. So it's okay. It's okay where you are. You're okay. We're going to develop you. You're not an all-American when you step on a basketball court or a football field in your freshman year. You're basically not immediately. You may be talented, you may be ready, but it takes growth and development. And we try to explain to people growth is painful. It takes work and you have to have good attention. And we teach the methods of how to be successful. That's one of the important things that we try to do. So when you integrate other faculty, I think faculty meetings are there, but I think, again, that's really a highly individual thing to reach out and try to connect so that your course is actually connecting how it relates to other things within the department, within the university, to know we live, and also internationally. We've spent a lot of time with all our international constructs, with postdocs, with visiting scholars, and then people see it in real life too, that, hey, that science is a world community.
Thanks, Bill. And you know, with the last 10 minutes here, I do want to note that we are open for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll read them aloud, and either Adam or Bill or some combination will answer your questions.
And Adam, we did have a question about Health Library. Did you want to just briefly mention the whole of the session?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Stephen, for asking that question about pricing for Health Library. So it's good to note that for Lippincott Connect and for PrepU, those are typically student-driven purchases. Those are, you know, the student would take responsibility for getting that themselves. Whereas Health Library is it's an annual subscription, you know, typically paid for either out of the department or through the library, and it is. The price of that is determined based on how many students will need to use it in that year. And that's a discussion that you can have with your content solutions advisor to determine.
Just as an aside, while questions are maybe coming in, one of the things that we've also done successfully in the past is to try to take, controversial facts and try to look at what's fact and what's fiction. So there's lots of methods you can do in your classes to basically try to find out, well, what do we know? And I think one of the things that students love to hear is the fact we don't know it all. I don't know it all. We up front are it's really important to understand that, has been noted in the last year, that science is an evolving revisionist phenomenon, and that's very important that students need to understand. And that's where the first chapter again was so important in writing it, and LWW allowing me to put that chapter in because there was a little bit of pushback. But the bottom line, we do that, and even the other ACSM book that Dr. Armstrong and I wrote on research methods is so important for people to understand, to bring research alive into your class and be able to let people feel that they can look at it and understand the component parts. And it really brings the idea of information and context to bear, especially when they're going to go into fields now that really need to be professional and need to be evidence-based practice.
Thanks, Bill. We have another question from Sue Graves. Dr. Kraemer, what is the one takeaway point that has worked for you in your online class since COVID-19? Also, how are you remaining being connected with your students in a class of 60 plus? Good question.
Well, I think in COVID, that was a real issue, especially for the online classes only. When you have an online class only, they're just seeing you. You're producing a whole group of TV shows. And basically, there are 65 names out there, 100 names that are basically like in the one class that are there, and they're just viewing you like a television show. And that was a real challenge. So we spent a lot of time allowing us to have individual small group Zoom meetings with students. And then again, Zoom meetings are really interesting too, because again, they may or may not be, comfortable with trying to interact with it. But I think in small groups on different topics, this is one way you can do it. But it's definitely been a challenge. And that's why the interaction with students is such an important aspect, apart from what all the online educational institutions and courses do. If you don't have really a significant interaction to get to learn where those students are trying to go and what they're trying to do, what their aspirations are, and the type of things that are important that they need to know, and us being able to underscore, you need to understand, you're going to go into physical therapy and you don't understand neuromuscular physiology and how they do strength training, you're missing a big component part. So relevance throughout the classes relative to the different fields they're moving into is very important. Even when you have to go out, as we did, bring experts in on Zoom from other areas, a physical therapist that comes in and talks about it, bringing other people in to basically bring that alive. And that's been the real advantage of Zoom. I've been able to bring experts from all around the world, former students, postdocs, that can come in and talk about, hey, how do we do this? How do we do this? And they see, wow, that person is doing it. And basically, you get this perspective of the fact that you need to know this because of this or that. So I think it's been a challenge, and we've learned a lot, and we still got a lot more to learn. But I think with relative to online education, the key is that you don't want to just have ghosts out there, and that's the big concern we have, is to remove those ghosts, those names only that we see here in this particular webinar. I mean, it's an educational experience, but the fact is, I can't really get in and work with you and really try to motivate you and promote it. But that's got to be done in some ways. And I think a lot of students that are participating want that, and I think that's really the importance, to be personable, and that's the only way we've been able to achieve some degree of success again, with the considerations for online only education. But that the combination probably work a little better when you get to know them on Zoom. And then as things change, we'll go back to the more conventional learning experiences. But even that, when I taught 1,000 kids at Penn State, or 300 kids in ex-phys at Penn State, they're just a whole pile of students, and I go in and teach, you get similar problems. So connecting with them and trying to understand that. Usually the ones that I connected best with were the ones that ended up 100 or so that worked in my laboratory. They're the ones you would see on a daily basis in the real environments that you go with. So it's a challenge. Great question. I don't have a lot of answers, but that's some of the concepts we've worked with.
I want to try and sneak in one more question here for Adam about PrepU. I know that there's a new version of the PrepU being released this August, I believe it is, that's tied back to Dr. Kraemer's book. Can you speak a little bit to the benefits or the changes and how that new edition works?
Sure. So right now, On the Point, the second edition of Dr. Kraemer's book is available. In August, we'll have the third edition, PrepU, available. I believe the book is available already. The major benefit to PrepU is that you're increasing engagement with your students. You're assigning them quizzes. They're taking quizzes themselves. And you get to drill down to each individual student and see how they're performing, and catch them before it's too late, right? This is a formative assessment tool meant to help your students along and make sure they don't fall behind. That may not be such a, it may not seem like such a big deal if you've only got, 12 students in a classroom, but some of the faculty that I talk to, some of these classes are upwards of, 100 people, 100 students in a class. That's when PrepU really starts to kind of shine, because then you can really get down to the students who are at those lower mastery levels. They're at the 1 or the 2 or the 3, when really at at that point in the course they should be shooting for a 6. We always said, back when we would whenever I would do a demonstration of PrepU, to give you an idea of how mastery level works for PrepU, is if they're shooting a 1 or 2, obviously they're new to the concepts, they're still learning. If they're sitting at about a 3 or a 4, they can be conversational about that topic. And if they're reaching up to a 6 or a 7, and keep in mind 8 is the highest mastery level, if they're at a 6 or a 7, they're ready to teach others about that particular topic.
One of the things too that you might think about using it for is a pretest. I have gone to evaluate where the students are in the knowledge on a topic, and Adam might have some ideas, because you can use it as a pretest to see where the kids are on a typical topic. They may be very far ahead on some, and our hardest areas for the study that we found this past semester were like cardiorespiratory and endocrine, okay, and then immune followed. So we could rank based on understanding where the test scores come and where the pre-test scores, what the hardest areas because of lack of background. So I think that's something in the future that's going to be more important. What are you faced with each section? It's going to be a different challenge.
Yeah, actually, Dr. Kraemer, that reminds me of another feature that PrepU offers, and it's about common misconceptions. So if you have students who are answering a question incorrectly in the same way as the other students are answering it incorrectly, PrepU will alert you about that, so that next time you are convening with your students, you can correct that misconception, in front of them.
Right. I think these are very important. The big challenge you have is the fact that how much time on the economic theories, it's just like Moneyball. When you talk about algorithms and time, you try to find things that are going to be time saving. And here's where you want to go to your content services specialist, solutions advisor rather, to really understand how you can maximize efficiency too, because there's a time efficiency algorithm that's going on. So you want to make sure that you're doing the best thing you can do to get the most out of the students, but also have time to do these other elements that are academic responsibilities that you're being looked at as a faculty member.
Well said.
Well, we are just at the end of the hour, so I unfortunately need to wrap us up. Dr. Kraemer, I want to thank you again for joining us today and sharing your insights and valuable experience from your career. Adam, thank you for sharing some of the different Wolters Kluwer products that can help support faculty members. And again, I just want to remind everybody that you will be receiving an email within the next day or so that has the link for the recording. Again, if you want to watch this again or share with any of your colleagues, please feel free. And I shared in the chat area the link to the form if you're interested in contacting Wolters Kluwer at all and getting some more information on anything that we've discussed today. Please feel free to do that. And with that, I'm going to wrap things up and end the session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Be
Thank
safe.
you.
Great day.